Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of SSX 3. I play it on the Xbox Series X via backwards compatibility. It's also available on the Xbox One, Xbox 360, and if you go far enough back, Xbox PS2 and GameCube. Otherwise, this is really just for, Xbox players, I guess. So let's get into the story, which is you pick from a wacky cast of characters to compete in a crazy-ass snowboard competition, and that's about the story. I mean, I do think it is kind of interesting that on each of the three mountains that you are on, you will have a specific character that is your rival, and if you're racing against them, they will be dirty assholes. They will hit you, they will knock you over, they will take every opportunity to try and screw you over if you are racing them and you are, right next to them. But, like I said, there really isn't a story. This is one of those games that, and I will get into it, is driven by gameplay. But let's go on to the audio, and I gotta say, the soundtrack, it works for the game. It's got a lot of licensed music, a lot of DJ music, a lot of remixes and stuff like that, and it's not that it's bad music, it's just not music that I would want to own in my spare time, but I think while you're playing, it works very well and fits the aesthetic of the game. As for the voiceover work, there's not a huge amount. You get your one-liners from your competitors, from your character, as well as there is a DJ Atomica, who he talks a lot. Man, he talks a lot. But I wouldn't say it's poorly done. I think it works well in the game and the context of the game. As for the sound effects, I enjoyed the sound effects in this game. This is an over-the-top kind of game, so some of the sound effects are very over-the-top and they work well, but the sound effects for when you're moving through the snow and whatnot, I think is actually pretty solid. But let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is, a snowboarding game. You can race, you can do tricks, there are high score competition type things, there's also just free riding down the mountain and exploring and collecting things. But this is also, as I've mentioned, very over the top, so when you're doing tricks, they're pretty insane. The amount of air you get is pretty insane. The kind of grinds you do, the kind of rails you can grind on, all of that is really just way over the top, and it's a lot of fun. And as you do tricks, during your run, you'll build up the Uber meter, which allows you to do even crazier, bigger tricks, get higher scores. You can do all sorts of spins and backflips and combine those and spin while you're on a rail and do super moves on a rail and shit. And this was back when EA was fun and they had EA Big, which was their over-the-top sports stuff. And, I missed it. I miss when EA did that. And this game really kind of just rubbed it in my face how much I missed that. There is other stuff as well. You earn money from the competitions as well as some of the items you find in the world, which allows you to upgrade your rider, get new gear for them, stuff that you might just use to customize their appearance. As I mentioned earlier, you have your rivals on each mountain, and those rivals, not a huge story element, but gameplay, when you're racing them, like I said, they'll be just massive assholes to you and try and screw you over and ensure that you lose the race. And you do on each mountain have a specific race or competition that is specifically against them, and you have to outscore them or outdo one of their times, beat them in a race, etc. And while I won't say that the gameplay is super in-depth, there's any mechanics that are insanely difficult to get a hang of, it's just a lot of fun. Now let's get into the controls, and to put it simply, they're awesome. They're a little weirdly mapped out, you have to get used to that. Most of your moving will be done with the left stick, but then to spin and flip in the air, you have to use the D-pad. So that is a little weird and a little hard to get used to at first. And by hard, I massively struggled with it at first, but then once I, looked it up online, I got the hang of it and it worked fantastically and I got really used to it. Once you get used to it, it works great. It's just getting used to it that is the challenge. It surprised me how well these controls still work today. We're talking about a game that is almost 20 years old, and from a control standpoint, it was really, actually surprisingly good. It held up so well. Now let's get into the graphics and visuals, and I'm gonna say, yeah, I know that's not a great unit of measure, but the graphics, it looks like shit. It looks terrible. Not terrible, but it doesn't look great. It does have kind of a cartoony vibe attached to it, so it kind of works. But the insane lack of texture in so many places and how primitive the texturing is, and man, how bad the backgrounds look. You can see the pixels in the background JPEG. it looks really rough. But I think the style is there, that visual style of making it cartoony, which really fits just the overall over-the-top nature of the game. I actually think it works, and once you get used to it, and once you understand that this game actually controls well and is still fun to play, it just kind of works and you start to forget about, you know, how it looks. Or at least I found myself forgetting about how it looked. There were definitely some times, though, where I will admit I was like, wow, wow, I can see those polygons, baby. So, I mean, visually, it obviously, I mean, this is, like I said earlier, an 18-year-old game, so it's not going to look as great as it could. I mean, relatively recently, Steep came out, it looked beautiful. This looks nothing like that, and quite frankly, I had a lot more fun with this than Steep. Like, this is one of those games where they really kind of nailed what they were going for already, and they just kept going with it, and it turned out well, and I think visually you can see where they were. But that also bleeds into the wrap-up, which is now, and, you know, this game is old, but it was still a hell of a lot of fun to play. There are some things that are missing, you know, there's not as much content as you may like. You can basically replay the game with each of the different characters, but there's not a whole lot beyond that, so it is an older game and it shows right there. But like I said earlier, the gameplay and the controls, that really, they're married so well and they hold up so well, and it's just, I had a lot of fun playing this. So if you can go back and play this, if you have an Xbox One, an Xbox 360, a Series X, whatever, I'd recommend playing this. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, do you remember when EA was actually a cool company? Because it was a long ass time ago, but this was one of the games when they were. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.